This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa Lewis. In today's episode, I speak with renowned author and podcaster, Joe Saul-Sehy. Now, you may know Joe because of his podcast, Stacking Benjamins. That's not the only podcast he's a part of, but that's the one we're going to focus on today. Stacking Benjamins is kind of car guys meets storytelling, comedy, and content. And the content in this case is personal finance, money, getting out of debt, and so much more. Now, the book, which I read in anticipation of our conversation, is entitled Stacked. Let me give you the full title. It's Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management. And we're going to talk all about this. As brief background to the book, in case you haven't read it yet, you can learn about everything from side hustles to hiring a legit financial advisor to planning for emergencies to what's new and exciting and actually worth your time in financial apps and software. If you're looking for the same old get-rich-quick cliches, avocado toast shaming, or alphabet soup of incomprehensible financial terms, you will not find them here. Instead, Joe and co-author Emily Birkin take you step by step along the way to financial success with their signature blend of shrewd financial information and wacky humor. Let's get to the conversation. Joe Saul-Sehy, thank you so much for joining the Visible Voices podcast.
I'm super happy to be here. I came on to announce my retirement because I don't think there's anything better I could do after this. Is there anything that would beat this?
Well, it's a great question. For audience members that haven't gotten to know you yet, that would be a little bit of a premature retirement in that currently you are 55. In about a month, you're going to be 56.
Wow.
And now you're turning pink. You and I share that we are both Aquariuses. So what does that mean to you?
To be an Aquarius? What is being wow? What does mean? Okay. As long as I've been doing this, I've been doing financial media forever. I've never been asked what it means to me to be an Aquarius. It's funny. It means more than it probably should. I really like the fact that we Aquariuses are known for our creativity, for our love of the arts, for our desire to make pretty things, to make beautiful things. This sweater, the people who are listening to the audio podcast have no idea how beautiful this sweater is that I'm wearing right now, but 1980s beautiful. But I like that. And I like leaning into it. I especially like leaning into it in the area of finance because I feel like so much of what I'm surrounded by in the financial arena is people trying to get rich quickly. And I know that from just the titles of our episodes, right? You can see which ones a lot of people listen to and which ones people don't. And some of our most beautiful, most creative episodes, not that many people listen to. And then we have one with this catchy, get rich quickie kind of title, and tons of people listen to that. And I think that there's a huge industry of people then that prey on that and people wanting to find this magic pill to get rich quickly. And because of that, they peddle there's this formula like more tips per hour, more tips per minute. And I don't want anything to do with that. I want to make something that's pretty and fun and sticky that people will remember and maybe laugh a little bit and have some fun with money topics.
I'm going to expand more on our creativity as Aquarians. And I'll say also, for people that aren't familiar, we are independent. We are independent thinkers. We are leaders. We are known, depending on the horoscope of the day, to be a bit stubborn. And moreover, I want to use that word right there. Moreover, I want to tie in the fact that our birthstone is amethyst. So it's actually prescient. I think I want to use that word right there too, as well as fortuitous that you are wearing a purple sweater. Now, audience is like, okay, Resa, where are you going with this? So audience, I asked Joe to wear this purple sweater for a reason. Before we go deep into that reason, because it's money and finance related, I want to bring up one of the key readings for you as a child, which was the 1959 book by Frank W. Dixon, The Hardy Boys Detective Manual. Now, I did grow up knowing a little bit about Hardy Boys, a little bit about Nancy Drew. I remember the TV shows, but I read the books as well. And this is what you found out in this book, and I want to know how this relates to finance and who you are now, Joe. This is what this book is about: how to follow a suspect, how to know if you're being followed, How to Dust for Prince. It's a great book for someone who'd like to go into law enforcement in the future as a part of their interests.
You did your homework. In the creation of Stacked, the book that I co-wrote with a woman named Emily Guy Birkin, I wrote a book before this, and I handed it to my alpha reader, my wonderful spouse, Cheryl, who is a pediatrician. And I handed it to her. And I think, Resa, she got 10 pages into it and said, this sucks. It was really like a lot of books. It was really preachy. It was like, Joe knows so much about money. And it wasn't at all the campy, fun thing that our show, Stacking Benjamins, is. We're very serious about humor. We've studied humor. And the reason for that is because of the fact that there's this study by a group called Nonfiction Research, where they dive into these horrible statistics about the number of people that have stolen people's lunches out of the refrigerator at work. I think all of us have worked in a workplace where that's happened, or the number of people that have actually eaten off of somebody else's plate because they were starving, things like that. But when faced with the idea that they could say this anonymously, 50% of us say that we cry about our money, roughly 50%. And when I first read that, I thought, okay, this is probably people I buy that, but that's probably people living paycheck to paycheck. And yes, people living paycheck to paycheck are maybe a smidgen more likely to cry about their money. The numbers in the high 40s, though, for people making over $250,000 a year, they cry about their money. And it's because our money's going one way, our values are going another. So we use humor as a way to lower the temperature. We make things campy to lower the temperature because this is so serious and we get so worked up about it that we want to tell people it's okay to mess up. It's okay to have some fun with this. This is a long way of around your question. So how do we get to the Hardy Boys? So yeah. I'm at this bookstore. So I have this failed book that I don't want to release. That really truly is just another on the pack of the books I talked about earlier about more tips per minute and smart. And I'm walking around the kids section. I'm just trying to get inspired. And I see this book. I see the Hardy Boys Detective Manual. And Resa, when I was in 4th grade, my little brother Tony and I carried this book everywhere because when you open up the book, to your point, at the beginning it says, this is written with the help of a real live retired FBI agent. And I remember turning to my brother like, this is legit. Like, we will learn how to be a detective in this book. And I was so excited. And that feeling of excitement, when I first started getting into money in the 1980s, I remember watching TV with my mom in the morning. We'd watch Good Morning America or the Today Show, and they'd have this money expert talking about how if you even out your utility bills, how it won't save you money over the long term, but it will help you budget. So you've got the same amount coming out of your checkbook every month. I thought, wow, that's great. And how to automate your expenses. And I remember getting excited about these little tiny tricks. So I remember feeling that when I was in the bookstore, looking at the Hardy Boys Detective Manual and thinking, okay, this is super. I want to go back to the days when on a muddy day, my dad would pull out of the driveway and, my brother and I are out there looking at the tire tracks because that's what you do.
I remember those sketches in the book of the tire tracks and dusting things.
Oh, my mom would touch a door handle and we're over there with the tape. My brother and I got the tape and we're getting her. I don't know what my mom and dad did, what their crime was, but we were all about it. So I wanted that campiness in my book. I felt like it was much more what we're about with Stacking Benjamins, what our kind of North Star is. Yeah,
we are going to get into the book. And for listeners, audience members that are wondering, let me read the title, Stacked, Your Super Serious, quote, Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management. And 2 questions before we get into some of the granulars. How are you different having written this book?
I am more and more and more committed to storytelling. It's funny, when we first started our podcast, I thought, okay, I'm going to be the only person making a podcast where we're sharing the secrets of the universe about money. And then you find out there's this huge world of people all doing the same stuff. And I also found that numbers in this art form don't resonate. Don't cut through. Like if anybody's walking the dog while they're listening to us, if I say 36.83% of statistics are made up on the spot, like that joke doesn't even resonate with people. Like it takes you a second to think it's a joke because you got lost in that number and the way you tell things.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I felt like Emily and I really just through the process of trying to make each other laugh by talking about financial basics. Like when Emily, I wrote half the book, Emily wrote half of it, and she would send me chapters and I would send her chapters. And there was one goal. I know Emily's competent. She knows her stuff. She knows I'm competent. I know my stuff. So it wasn't about that. It was about how can we tell the story in a different way? So when Emily says, here's how a mutual fund works, she goes, you know what? Mutual funds are boring. Let's go full out Samuel L. Jackson, who talks about MF snakes on the MF plane. And I think everybody can fill out what MF is. And she goes, let's talk about, instead of mutual funds, let's talk about them as MFs. And then she proceeds to tell you all about mutual funds, but she doesn't call them mutual funds. She calls them MFs. And she takes this horribly boring topic of mutual funds and makes it so damn fun. Just, I was reading it, knowing it, and I'm fascinated reading her words about how mutual funds work. Just imagining Samuel L. Jackson reading them to me. So I'd say I became even more committed to that way of conveying some of these fundamental truths about money through stories.
Love it. Listeners are now a bit skeptical as well that, well, there are so many finance books out there. Everybody's talking about personal finance. I will say when I finished med school, then residency, I had quite a bit of debt and no one had ever taught me how to navigate that debt or what to do with it. It was just something everybody around you had and did. I tell a story famously. I was always scared. I knew I didn't know, so I was scared to death. So I've always done the live below my means and not carry credit card debt, not because I knew that was actually the wisdom, but more just because I was so afraid. I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew I didn't know, so I just didn't want to get into trouble. And there was one key evening during residency, met up with a friend of mine. She always had amazing outfits, looked very put together. And she said to me, how many credit cards do you have maxed out? And I looked at her, I said, what? And she goes, how many? How many do you have maxed out? And I actually wasn't honest completely at the time because I had 0 credit cards maxed out because number one, I only had 1 credit card, but I was, again, scared. But she had sort of taken up this concept that everybody in the US has maxed out credit cards and as many as you can have. And that was the story of everybody's story. I finish residency. I've got all this debt. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to live below my means. And I started looking for books. I started to read myself out of my deficiencies. And I was very overwhelmed by all the ones that suggested I write out a budget. It just seemed like a lot to do and I was overwhelmed. So I really was drawn to David Bach's Smart Women Finish Rich. And it was not the title. In fact, the title's a bit, but I'm not against having good financial health. But I liked it because it was very practical. It was very digestible, and I can make nice folders in my, file of facts in my filing cabinet. So it was very doable. And, I've moved from David Bach to reading many more books on finance and thinking about it. And, after a while, some of the same exact wisdom resonates and is repeated. That's all to say, what makes your book different?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Before I get to that, just to comment on what you just said, what I love about David Bach's work and about that book in particular was how he impresses upon you that this isn't about discipline. And I love that. This is about setting up systems and making things automatic so you can think about the things you really want to think about. Nobody wants to walk around thinking about their credit card debt or how many credit cards I've got maxed out or don't have maxed out. It's amazing, by the way, as you said that, I had a friend in college named Lisa. And it's funny that I haven't thought about Lisa in forever. And I remember Lisa was running a Ponzi scheme with her dad, which was she was getting these credit cards and maxing them out. Then she was using a balance transfer to wipe that out. And she had so many credit cards and her dad was paying the bill, but he had no idea that it was a Ponzi scheme that was going to fall. I have no idea what ended up happening to Lisa and how she came clean with her father, who was going to be ultimately paying this bill for her or making her pay the bill.
I think the Hardy Boys Detective Manual will help you try to find her.
That's right. That's right. I could find that perpetrator. I just got to go back to that. How is our book different? The cool thing is that because of the number of we're coming up on episode 1500 of Stacking Benjamins. So because I'm very lucky to know the landscape of books, I was very cognizant of where the holes are. And here's where I think the hole is. A friend of mine, a guy named Saul-Sehy, who's a big name in the personal finance space. Ramit opens his wonderful book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich, another incendiary title, right? Mm-hmm. He opens up with saying, everybody starts with goals. Goal setting doesn't work. I mean, people look at every year, how quickly do we forget about our resolutions? They're gone. And I remember nodding my head. He said, so I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with teaching you how to lower your cell phone bill or something, doing something actionable. And I agreed with him that goal setting doesn't work for a lot of people. I also agreed with him that doing things actionable is the downfall of many books. We read these personal finance books and we go, okay, that's a great idea. And then we chuck it. There's not actionable stuff. So I wanted to, number one, start with goals because I think Ramit just avoided a problem that we have. And instead, if we can make the goal more sticky. So this book teaches you how to make the goal sticky through a concept I call timelining, which we could talk about. Because I do believe that once you spatially timeline your goals out and put them in a cage match like it's an MMA match and you make them fight it out against each other, we get away from money topics and we get into this wonderful values discussion. What do I truly value? And is my money actually chasing that? That's how we avoid crying about our money. I think the book is different in the fact that when I got home from that Powell's bookstore with this idea of I want the Hardy Boys Detective Manual, but about money. My mom, I was turning 50, and my mom is finally giving me all the stuff out of the attic that she'd been keeping in mind, like the father-son bowling trophy where my dad and I took like 5th place, and one of the arms is broken off a long time ago. Like why she wouldn't trust me with that until 50, I have no idea. But in that box was the Cub Scout Wolf Guide. And what I love about the Scouts, whether it's Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, that they got right a long time ago is this concept of gamification. If we turn it into a game, we're going to go after that. We're going to be okay with messing it up, which 99% of what we do in money, you can mess it up and you'll learn from that. There's that 1% that's irrevocable that we got to watch out for. So we took the Hardy Boys Detective Manual and the Cub Scout Wolf Guide, and instead of chapters, they're achievements. And at the end of every chapter, it's not what you know, it's what you do. So there's a bunch of check boxes, do this, do this, do this. And then we have a little badge that you get after your mom signs that you actually did it and dates it. So you can get 14 achievements throughout this. So we tried to make it actionable. And I think that's a little different as well.
I'm Dr. Resa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adair Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book being published in April of 2024 by HarperCollins. We believe every future goal, complicated task, and healthy habit can be broken down into simple, measurable, and tiny skills that you can practice and then excel by removing obstacles, overcoming assumptions, and maximizing your potential at work and in life. You can pre-order it now. Go to bookshop.org, amazon.com, or wherever you buy your books. Joe, there are so many reasons that you and I are a podcast conversation match. It's as if you've seen my little prep notes, but you haven't. So timelining is written down. I really loved that. I happen to be very geeky and very goal-oriented, very ambitious. And so I was a brownie. I wanted to quit. My mom would not let me quit. She was trying to teach some lesson about quitting. I didn't have an issue with quitting. She should have let me quit and listen to me. She didn't. Anyway, I wasn't allowed to quit. And I was like, fine, if I need to do this thing, then I'm going to get badges. So I literally worked my way through the equivalent, the Girl Scout Manual, which by the way, is definitely not as cool as the Wolf Manual. And like Boy Scouts, you got to do things. My experience with Girl Scouts was like, not dynamic, not fun, but hence the reason why but I was like, fine, I'll just get a lot of badges. So I basically one weekend set myself, and I think I like completed like 6 badges, had my mom sign off. Next thing I know, I still have my amazing sash. Next time I see you, I'm going to show you my sash. It's ridiculous and kind of speaks to who Resa is as a woman. But games and gamification. So I know that you have board game nights. I may or may not have grown up around the same time you have. So we had lots of Parker Brothers and other games. So I think my first ever Coursera was one on gamification. So Kevin Werbach out of Wharton spoke all about gamification, and it completely changed the way I thought about things like airlines and status, what motivates adults, what motivates people. So regarding the gamification, I'm interested in, name 1, 2, maybe 3, your choice, dealer's choice, games that listeners may know and what each game teaches about finance and money management. And you're not allowed to use Monopoly.
Oh, fabulous. You know what I am going to do though? I'm going to go right there. How about this? I'll go to something Monopoly adjacent. I'm going to go to Monopoly adjacent. One people know, the other one they don't. If you're trying to teach your children about money, not yourself, but kids about money, Monopoly Junior, an older version that you can still get on eBay
I don't know if that counts. All right, I'll allow it.
Is a phenomenal one. There's a game that a lot of people probably haven't heard of called Power Grid, which is, I call it Monopoly for people who have a brain. Because while it's not difficult, and by the way, the theme is absolutely horrible. You are, you're setting up a utility network across a map of the United States. So you're building utilities. What's neat about Power Grid though, and at first when you start playing it, you're like, this isn't Monopoly. And you get to the end of the game, you're like, this is totally Monopoly. I am trying to cut out my competition. I'm trying to decide which types of power plants I want. So I can go with cheap power, which is coal or oil, but then I'm going to spend a ton of money on resources to get this area of the country powered up. Or I can go with renewable resources, wind, nuclear, incredibly expensive upfront. I don't know how the heck you get the money, but then the resource game is very, very low. Well, uranium is very difficult if I'm going to go that route. But different, the fact that there's an upfront cost to things and then there's an ongoing cost. If I go cheap initially, there's going to be big cost later. If I go big time upfront, well, then I can minimize my cost later. And which one's better for me? I like that. Third one, I love a game called Acquire. Acquire just came back into print. And a lot of people might not know this game, but it's been around since the 1960s. Very easy to play. You are so imagine like Scrabble tiles, but they all have a letter and a number on them, A1 through A10. And then there's A1 through 10 through J1 through 10. So it's this board. And if somebody lays tile B4 down, all you do on your move is 2 moves. You put a tile down on the board, and then you buy 3 shares of stock. Well, the way that companies are formed is if you put B4 down and I put B5 down, 2 tiles next to each other is a company. And then you put a little marker on it, and that company is 2 squares, so the shares only cost this. But if you then lay B6 next to it, now it's 3 big, and now the shares are worth more. And you're trying to merge companies into other companies. And there's a little head game going on, which is neat, because everybody wants to be the biggest, baddest, strongest player in the game. So when people first play this, they always want to swallow the other companies. So if there's another company right next to it, they want to swallow it. Well, here's the deal. These are not open market companies. I can't sell my shares the only time. The only time I have a liquidity event is if I get swallowed. So I actually want to sell my company to you so that I can get more money to buy more shares to hopefully beat you. And this idea that liquidity events matter, I think is big because, the universe only presents us opportunities when my money's tied up, right? Or I don't have any. The universe always picks the worst time to go, I've got this wonderful thing for you. So realizing that having your money available at the right time, I think is a great lesson that Acquire teaches us.
Thanks for that. Excellent learning and excellent gamification in the life of Joe. And, you have made reference, and even what you shared just now, there's a lot of emotion tied up with money. And you've mentioned that it's questionable whether you trust yourself with plastic. And this goes back to college when the predatory behavior of credit card companies was allowed. Correct me if I'm wrong. You signed up and got a shiny American Express, and you went out and bought this purple sweater. And there may have been a big meal that was splurged, and you said, it's on me. So why do you think that money is so emotional? And what is your current relationship emotionally with money?
Money is super emotional, and it's getting worse because we look at what people have and we think that what we have helps us become more. And that's a big fat lie. It's an incredible lie. I remember, just as a kid before the holidays, I'm old enough that we got the JCPenney catalog, and I would look
and JCPenney.
Right. And I'd look at all these things to make my list, right, of all the things that I wanted. But because if I got these things, I'd be more. And, and even when I got the stuff, though, there was always this emptiness later about I got it and it's still me. But I don't think we see through that. A lot of cultures. I just interviewed yesterday a wonderful woman, Gigi Gonzalez, who is a first generation mentor for Latina women. And she talked about how in her family, her dad has 4 cars because car culture means that you have status. It means that this is a fantastic thing. And it drives her crazy as a money geek. Mm-hmm. That a depreciating asset equals more status. And I always thought when I was growing up and when I was bad with money, I had horrible habits. In fact, I was teaching other people good habits and I had rotten habits myself. I thought it was, hey, it's great for you, but I can do it a different way. Completely wrong. And one of the big lies was, if I just make a little more money, that will solve my problem. Also not true. I made my first year as a financial planner somewhere around $85,000. And this is in 1994. So you take that every 18 years, prices double. So if we look at inflation, that's like earning like $170,000 today, or more than that, right? Maybe over $200,000 today. I made $85,000. Resa, if I had made $100,000, I would have spent $110,000. If I made $110,000, I would have spent $130,000. Made $130,000, I would have spent $100,000. I had such crappy habits that I couldn't get out of my own way. So I had to lock those down. I don't even remember your original question.
Well, you basically just actually perfectly illustrated why money is so emotional. And so I'm asking today,
yes,
2024
yes.
Joe, what is your relationship emotionally to money?
Well, it gets worse. I'm going to finish the first part of the question because it gets worse. Social media makes it worse. Now all we see is all these people that get happier because they own this thing. I have this thing and you don't have this thing. I live this perfect life. I'm in front of this beautiful house. I learned that there is a mock-up. There's a studio in Los Angeles that you can rent that looks like the inside of a private jet. And this thing is booked every single day by influencers so that they can show you that they're inside of a private jet that they're really not on. That's the life we live in. That makes us emotional. I don't have it. So I spend an hour flipping through social media. I feel horrible. Why do I feel horrible? Because I don't have any of this good life that other people don't have, that they're pretending to have. For me, I have learned, and this is a learned trait over time, not to trust my emotion. If I feel X, that means the inverse may probably be true. I become a contrarian. So if I get really excited about a stock, as an example, I think, ooh, this is a huge opportunity. My gut reaction is, what am I missing? Because if I'm this excited and the stock is low right now, there's clearly a reason. All this brain power in the universe knows why the stock is low. And I think it's a huge opportunity. My little tiny Joe Saul-Sehy brain is right. And all these wizards on Wall Street with their massive computers, they're all wrong. Stocks are low for a reason, right? There's always a reason. And so, and when I go high five myself, we had a great year in the stock market this last year for large company stocks. If I'm high fiving myself going, I am such a genius, every time I look at my statement, I have learned to go, oh no, oh no. Because when I high five myself, it's horrible. When I'm down and I'm like, oh, I am stinking. I'm following all the rules and I'm stinking. That is generally my time of greatest opportunity. So emotionally, I've had to train myself to be much more contrarian. I've also had to train myself that buying the thing does not equal a better life. As an example, the sweater I'm wearing, after I bought all my friends' lunch at this exclusive restaurant called Ruby Tuesday. I don't know if you've heard of it. They have a salad bar and everything. I take out this credit card that I just got and I said, I've got it. To your point, the story you told earlier. And because all I want to do is make friends. And I remember, by the way, then walking down to the other end of the mall, because I'm like a magnet to the most expensive thing. I see this sweater I'm wearing today on a mannequin. Not a great shopper, but I do know a snappy sweater when I see it. Duran Duran beautiful with this beautiful, lovely, I don't even know what you'd call this, argyle print, I suppose, on it. But maybe I remember seeing that.
Tooth.
Yeah, I see this and I go, okay. I need that. I go to the most expensive store in the mall, Nordstrom. I buy one of the most expensive sweaters. I'm at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. I can't wear this sweater.
Yeah.
I have to wear a uniform. I have to hide this in the drop ceiling in my room so that my commanding officers don't know that I even have this sweater. And yet I had to have it. I think it was lessons like that taught me to not trust myself, because what happened was I then, about 30 days later, 25-ish days later, I go down to get my mail because this is, I'm an old guy. This is before email pops up. And it was always exciting because you go to the mailbox and like the old time mailboxes that we had these glass fronts so you could see if you had mail. I
actually bought my college mailbox. It's behind me. It's like the biggest nostalgia piece, but yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You get so excited. You're like, oh, I got mail. It's awesome. And I remember this particular day, I get this piece of mail from American Express. I'm like, oh, I bet this is my partner, American Express. I love American Express. I took my friends to lunch. I bought this sweater. I bet they're thanking me. I'm 99% sure this is a Joe. Hey, we're a great team. We provide the plastic. You buy all this cool stuff. And it was a bill. And this sounds really dumb to say. I didn't see it coming. I had no idea that bill was coming. So I did what any smart person would do. I called my mom.
Mom.
Yep. And I said, hey, Mom, we have a problem. And Mom, there's a wonderful book by Ken Blanchard called The 1 Minute Manager. There's another one called The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. And the monkey is when I have a problem and I walk into your office, Resa, and I say, hey, Resa, we have a problem. Now the monkey extends itself to you. If you say, I'll take care of it, which is what I wanted my mom to do. Now the monkey's on her back, not on mine. Whew. Yeah. But thank goodness I got away with all this. Mom didn't do that. Mom said, you know what? No, this isn't our problem. This is your problem. Yeah. And I remember she even just hung up the phone and I wrecked my credit.
One of the things that's really important is equity and accessibility and belonging. And I do think that finance books, finance podcasts, personal finance, white people talking about money does not always read inclusivity and access. And I do think this concept of having bad credit, but oh, don't worry about it. Look at me. I worked my way out of it. Anybody can work their way out of it. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true for everybody in our country. So I'm wondering how you think about that, how you can approach that.
I think it's my job as a middle-aged white man to, it's funny. I was on a stage and actually said this. I had a wonderful Black woman next to me talking about inclusion and how she needed more Black women to step up. And I said, I don't disagree, but what we need is for me to step up.
100%.
And for me to be the guy who points out that our mentors can come from all different places. And while I believe our differences are what make us stronger, it's not easy to enter any discussion from a point of somebody who has a different background, culture, experience than you have. So we actually build that as a guy who takes very seriously my role in this job of teaching money. We have a visual calendar that we use, and we're not experts. I'm not an expert in inclusion. So I'm just going to tell you how, because we mess this up all the time. But the way that we fight this to make sure that our show is wide audience inclusive is we use a visual calendar, a Google Calendar, our producer Karen and I, and we look at the topics that we have. And we make sure that if we have teacher A on Monday, teacher B on Wednesday, who's going to be our guest, is going to be different, not in an HR checkbox diversity thing, but as an example, if we're talking about building wealth on Monday, we're going to talk about getting out of debt on Wednesday. Two different segments of our audience, both important people at different points. And then if we have, as an example, Gigi on our show, well, Gigi's great because as we record this, Gigi Gonzalez is going to be on our show in a couple weeks. Gigi's on Monday talking about culture and cash and about how we all have these different cultures and how she teaches Latina women how to do better with their money. But there's things that me, as a guy who grew up in redneck West Michigan, we have stuff in common. We have car culture in common. Most of my career was in Detroit. So she talks about her dad owning 4 cars. My family is that family. And so even though we look different, and we are from different places, we do have these touch points that where we can build this. I want to build people's ability to learn from people who aren't like them. But I also know that every teacher is not going to be for you. So if I can make it, we call our show the greatest, we call it the greatest money show on earth because we want it to be a circus. Because I love the 3 rings. I love the ADD of that. And so if you just stick with me long enough, I will help you find an entry point. I feel like if you don't like the tigers over here, I got an acrobat act that might be what you're more into. But on Monday, what's funny is we've got Gigi. On Wednesday, we have a guy in his late 30s, a guy named a researcher who writes for The Atlantic named Brian Klass. And Brian talks about how we're all more interconnected than we think. And it's funny because I have this young woman on Monday, this Latina woman who's talking about how we're all more interconnected than we think. And then I have a white man talking about how we're all more interconnected than we think. She's talking about money specifically. He's talking about the flukes that happen in our life and how I could do something that, Resa, someday may affect you because I made this one little move. You know, there might be this one thing.
And as an emergency physician, everybody gets sick, and everybody sick is everybody sick. At the end of the day, we all want food, shelter, clothing, access to education, and you and I are on the same page. So I'm going to end with my final question that I don't always ask at the end, but you, Joe, get it at the end. Here on The Visible Voices, we are amplifying people and who they are, what they're doing, their subject matter expertise. When did you realize you had a voice? And when did you start using that voice?
The quick answer is I don't know. I know when the journey really began, and it was later than it should have been. I have been a financial planner for 16 years, and there was a guy that was a mentor of mine named Chris. He was in management. Most of the, at American Express and then Ameriprise, a lot of the managers we didn't have a lot of respect for. But this guy, I totally did. He always put me first. He was an interesting case in leadership, Resa, where you learn that true leadership over time comes from the people that you manage. Because Chris was a little goofy. I remember other leaders saying stuff about Chris, and I remember a group of us going, "No, you don't get it. Chris is goofy because it works and because he lowers the temperature for all of us. He makes it easy for us to get our job done. He's totally always on my team. He takes care of me." Chris wrote a letter that was giving his notice and saying he was leaving the company. And he said, "I've done a great job of saving. Luckily, I can take some time off." He goes, "My problem is I don't know what I want to do. I know that unless Shirley MacLaine is right and we get to reincarnate, that I have one life, and I feel like I'm kind of wasting it because financial planning for me is about 85, 90% right, but it's not 100% right. And my problem is I spend so many hours doing this that I don't know what is right. So I'm going to take that savings and I'm just going to go figure out what it is." And he said, "I think I have other mountains to climb." And what's funny is I thought he was being metaphorical. He went and climbed Mount Everest twice. He runs an adventure travel company in Boulder now. Chris is an amazing guy who taught me at age 40. I already had a family. I'd already gotten myself into debt and then out of debt. Like I'd lived all this life, but I never really realized that I was completely in control. And I looked at my life and I went, man, financial planning, like 90% right. But I love the media piece. I love the teaching piece. I don't love sitting down one-to-one and having, I remember I had one client tell me one time, they said, I like having you here because I like having somebody to kick when things go wrong. And I didn't like being that guy. I didn't want to be. There were times when I would worry so much about my client's money and I'd call them and they'd go, this is okay. I'm like, no, it's not okay. You're not going to meet your retirement goal. And I was more worried about it than they were. And that bothered me. So at age 40, when I sold my business, mostly because of Chris, I sold it to become a high school teacher and a track coach, which is how I met my wife. We were middle school track coaches. I wanted to go back to the thing that I just loved, that filled me full of joy. And when I realized that chasing money and chasing joy are often two totally different things, it gave me this big aha. That was probably, Resa, the beginning of realizing that I had a voice, because it meant that I had control, right? I did have control, and I could shape my future, which was a great place to be.
The Resa Wrap-Up. Special thanks to Joe Saul-Sehy for joining me in conversation. Joe and I share a lot. One is the fact that we both have February birthdays. And in honor of, his credit card error in the 1980s, and the fact that amethyst, purple, is our birthstone, he wore the sweater, the exact sweater that he purchased when he was in college in the 1980s. So 3 things I learned from Joe. And boy, there are a lot of things that I learned from Joe, his book, his podcast, and hat tip to his co-author, Emily Birkin. Number 1, financial health is health. And audience, you've heard me speak about this on previous episodes. Part of taking care of yourself is taking care of your finances. So read books, listen to podcasts, watch YouTubes, speak with people you trust, and learn how to take care of yourself financially. Next, money is emotional. And a lot of those emotions come from our childhood, come from our family, come from traumas, perhaps, due to finances, due to money. So recognize that, own it, use it to empower you to learn more and be better. Finally, books. I'm a huge fan of reading, and Stacked falls into the category of books I would read about finances, financial health, navigating this thing called money, and overall, taking better care of you. That's all I had for you this week, audience. See you next time. The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices both known and unknown, discussing topics of healthcare, equity, and current trends. We are a production of the People's Media Network. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Please find me on social media at Resa E. Lewis and through the website, thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. If you like the podcast, please rate and review us. Share the podcast with a friend today. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, to be continued.